November 20th, 1917, 6:20, Havrincourt Wood, France. Engine cough, clutch bite, a steel hull shuddering in low gear. A Mark IV named Curse of Scotland grinds forward through fog. The driver eases the levers with both hands. Two gearsmen lean in on the brakes. The commander shouts over the engine as wire looms in a gray wall. Foreshadow in one line. In the next hour, the men inside this box will feel safer than anyone on foot and more exposed than anyone on Earth. By nightfall, the British will claim up to 8 kilometers of advance and thousands of prisoners, yet dozens of these machines will be burning silhouettes on the Hindenburg Line. Zoom out. Cambrai is the first deliberate massed tank attack, roughly 476 machines allotted, about 350-380 in the first lift of fighting tanks, grouped into battalions, companies, and sections. No preliminary barrage to churn the ground. A carefully plotted surprise, tapes late at night, objectives marked by compass bearings, infantry following lane by lane. The plan is simple. The Mark IV will solve the Western Front's arithmetic, wire, trench, machine gun, by turning time into distance. Steel across no man's land at 4 miles per hour, then infantry in its wake. Fortress on tracks. But question marks hang over every rivet. How thick is thick enough when field guns wait behind the next rise? How safe is a fortress that carries its own atmosphere of fuel vapor, carbon monoxide, and hot splinters? Months earlier, the same shape had disappointed on sodden ground at 3rd Ypres. There, mud swallowed tracks, gears screamed, engines boiled, tanks drowned standing still. Cambrai promises something else. Frost-hardened soil, chalk under turf, prepared routes. The machine is the same lineage, lozenge hull, wraparound tracks, sponsons jutting with weapons. But the Mark IV is a different proposition from early models. Armor improved, fuel moved to reduce fire risk. Male versions carry 2 6-pounder guns for strong points. Females carry machine guns for trench scourging. Average speed remains brutal and honest. Walking pace, sustained if the gearbox holds. Inside the first tank you meet, the temperature climbs within minutes. 8 men in a steel shell. Fumes pool under the roof. Oil mist slicks the floor plates. Spent casings clink underfoot. The commander peers through slits cut into armor that resists bullets, but not shock. Vision is a compromise, always. The noise is a continuous strike. Engine note, gear whine, track clatter, the sudden hammer of rounds hitting plates. Every impact throws splash, slivers of steel shaved by bullets, hot needles rattling the interior. Helmets and chainmail face masks make sense in here. They're not costume, they're survival gear. Wire meets track. The leading tanks drop fascines, bundles of brushwood the size of small cars, into trenches to make ramps for the hulls to pass. One section goes right through 3 belts without pausing. From above, the pattern is clean. Tank noses up over the first trench, balances briefly, then settles forward, tail rising, track biting again. The infantry behind them cross at a jog, heads low, mouths open to breathe. They do not expect this ease. They are trained to expect machine gun hurricanes. For once, the gun line ahead is silent, suppressed and distracted by the tank's arrival, muffled by the fog, overrun at the parapet. At Flesquières, the pattern breaks. On the far slope, German field artillery officers keep their discipline. A 77mm is slewed by hand to direct fire. The gun's crew crouch, sight, and fire at the flank of a tank traversing a slight crest. The shell hits square, the tank halts, flames push out from behind the sponson. Another gun engages at 300 yards. Tanks are hard targets for machine guns. They are ripe targets for guns that were designed to kill horses and limbers at 1,000 paces. Fortress meets its natural predator. By '08, the 1st British infantry waves have penetrated the forward trench system on a front where nothing moved for months. The numbers for one morning are startling. Several kilometers of depth in places. Thousands of prisoners stripped from dugouts that were supposed to be safe. Over 100 captured guns rolled back or abandoned. It looks like algebra solved by a new term, T for tank. But under the surface of the success runs a second ledger. Breakdowns, track throws, cracked gear teeth, engines seized by dust and strain. The Mark IV is fighting 2 enemies, the German defense and its own materials. Pause here and name the thing. Fortress because it carries armor enough to shrug off the weapons that pinned armies, rifles, machine guns, shrapnel. Death Trap because it concentrates risk, heat, fumes, and spall inside a sealed box. petrol stowage, ammunition lining the walls. Safety is not a constant, it is conditional. Inside the tank, you are safer than the man outside until the moment you are not. The pivot is a field gun shell, a trap door, a stuck gear, a tank commander's decision to push another 100 yards into unobserved ground. By July 1917, tank crews had learned to carry sandbags on the floors to absorb fragments. By autumn, they taped their cuffs and collars to keep splash from the face and neck. The Mark IV's armor thickness, modest by later standards, is a deliberate compromise weight against weight and engine output. It makes bullets skip, but it rings like a bell under impact. The exterior is riveted plate. Each rivet is a projectile waiting for the right hit. Crew drills attempt to tame the physics. Keep ammunition low, doors clear, personal gear strapped down, extinguishers within reach. It helps. It never removes the risk. Numbers again. A well-maintained Mark IV might run 30 to 35 miles on a tank of fuel. In a fight, it will be lucky to do 15 before overheating or throwing a track. Most crews will fight within a few thousand yards of their start line. Average speed, 3 to 4 miles per hour on firm ground, dropping to a crawl cross-country. Turning requires differential braking and brute force at the levers. A careless pivot tears a track. Recovery involves another tank roped to the casualty, both now vulnerable. You can build an armored fortress. You cannot armor time. Listen to the systems thinking that got it this far. The tank is not a miracle machine. It is a tool in a coordinated sequence. At Cambrai, there is survey without shellfire, smoke without confusion, planned routes without guesswork. Infantry are briefed to follow closely and to push into strong points after the tanks splinter them. Artillery is tasked to lift by the map, not by shell registration. When this choreography holds, the Mark IV seems invulnerable, threading wire, bridging trenches, facing down a machine gun nest with low-velocity, high-explosive from a 6-pounder gun. When one part slips, the machine's vulnerabilities become visible, as if a canvas were lifted. Micro to macro. Inside another Mark IV, call it a female variant covering a lane, two gunners swap barrels as they overheat, dipping them in water, carried in a canvas bucket. The commander marks his course by a church spire and a windmill. He steers by memory because his periscope is smeared with mud. On the floor, empty belts make a metal carpet. The hull lists slightly. The gearsman compensates with pressure on the brake. They pass a trench where men in spiked helmets put their hands up like schoolboys. The tank keeps moving because the order is to the final objective. Every minute stationary attracts artillery. The safest place is forward, until a gun finds the range. Now jump. The macro story of survivability is not about individual hulls. It is about what happens to armies that integrate these boxes into a plan. Take the tally for the first day at Cambrai. The British penetrate further with fewer initial casualties than any Western Front attack of comparable scale in 1917. That is the promise. Then the German counterattack, using stormtroop tactics and elastic defense, takes back much of the ground in days. Many tanks are bogged, burned, abandoned for want of fuel or spares, or picked apart by gun crews brought forward under cover of fog and ruin. That is the cost. You do not judge the Mark IV by a photograph of one burning hull or one clean trench crossing. You judge it by the complete loop: plan, breach, exploitation, and the ability to resist when the other side adapts. Crew experience anchors the ledger. 8 men share risk and skill. The driver has hands like vices by afternoon. The gearsmen have burns on their palms. The gunners learn to range by sound, not just sight, because vision slits give partial truths. The commander learns to read ground features as if they were words. A hedgerow that means good traction, a slight dip that means a field gun might be hiding. They learn to listen for a crack that is not like the rest, the sharper concussion of a direct-fire shell. They learn that when the hull is hit and stops, the order to bail out must be decisive and fast, because doors stick and the world outside may already be on fire. What happens next makes the pattern obvious. By winter, British units have templated maintenance with religious zeal: magneto checks, chain tension, track pin inspection, gear tooth alignment. Supply trains carry spare track shoes and pins in bulk. Recovery sections practice with beam jacks and ropes. Every hour of running needs hours in the workshop. The Mark IV is survivable as part of a system that feeds it spare parts, routes, reconnaissance, and time. It is a death trap when isolated, mishandled, or asked to substitute for combined arms. Build a side-by-side comparison, not as a list, but as a rhythm of effects. Infantry in 1916, without tanks, crossed wire at a walk behind a barrage. Casualties on bad days reached tens of thousands before noon. Infantry in November 1917, with tanks, crossed 3 wire belts behind steel that absorbed the first storm of bullets. Casualties in the initial assault were markedly lower, but field guns, mortars, and counterattacks still kill. The Mark IV reduces the exposure to one category of threat and increases exposure to others, particularly to concentrated artillery, close-in grenades, and mechanical failure under fire. The numbers told a different story after the first euphoria. Out of the hundreds sent forward at Cambrai, a high fraction did not return under their own power. Some were knocked out by direct fire. Some broke tracks on trenches, cut at angles, or collapsed fascine bundles. Some overheated and seized. The effect is cumulative. A tank that makes it to the red line and back is a veteran hull. A tank that stops halfway because of a snap pin is a static pillbox that attracts every gun in range. Now, the inversion. The Mark IV is safer in motion than at rest, safer in groups than alone, safer when it is one element in a moving problem set rather than the sole answer. That means design decisions that read unsafe in isolation, thin armor by later standards, a heavy reliance on crew drills and maintenance, limited speed, become tolerable when your purpose is to cross a specific belt of defenses in a specific time window under a specific weather pattern. Conversely, decisions that look safe in pamphlets, keeping all the crew inside, loading maximum ammunition, become lethal if the hull is immobilized under aimed artillery. By December 1917, both sides have absorbed the lesson. The British prove that shock, surprise, and massed steel can tear a prepared zone without preparatory fire. The Germans prove that a flexible defense, mobile guns, and fast counter-thrusts can erase the map lines within days. Both sides learn to listen for the tank's approach and to bring forward field guns for point-blank fire. Crews adopt tactics, hull-down positions behind banks, flanking approaches on gun flashes, immediate suppression by accompanying infantry to extend their survival window. The fortress finds a doctrine. The death trap finds its antidotes. Return to the crew. One commander counts time by impacts. The first impact is alarming. The 10th is just information. He learns to match the pitch of hits to caliber. The 7.92mm clatter is nothing new. It sounds like rain on a tin roof. The 37mm pop is a warning sign, a light gun testing you. The 77mm crack is an order, not a suggestion. Move. He signals the driver, who heaves at the left lever and slams a boot to the right brake. The hull turns like a barge at a bend. Ahead is a dip and a hedge. Safety is not a place. It is a small difference in angle and timing. Zoom out to the logistics chain that makes a Mark IV fight. Petrol in tins moved by hand from dumps. Engine oil in cans from lorries that bog at the first shell hole. Spare track shoes stacked like horseshoes. Tools in canvas rolls. Mechanics sleeping under tarps. Each tank that fights has a tale of dozens of men who do not sit inside but carry the risk in advance. If the question is fortress or death trap, the answer includes these invisible hands. A tank that does not start is neither. A tank that starts without a plan is the second. Consider the moral arithmetic as well. The Mark IV suppressed machine gun nests and likely saved infantry lives that would otherwise be spent crossing wire. But it also created new categories of casualty: crews burned alive, men with lungs scarred by fumes, shell-shocked drivers who flinched at the engine's rising note. Survivability shifted from the prone man in the mud to the standing box in motion. War moved risk along a conveyor. It did not end it. Midpoint reveal. The Mark IV's true legacy in 1917 is not the steel itself, but the choreography it forced. Lanes, timings, interlocks between arms, and the concept that mobility and shock could replace attrition when the ground permitted. The tank was the proof of concept for a system that, refined in 1918 and after, would break open armies. The paradox of survivability narrowed. The safer the system, the safer the tank. The safer the tank, the more ambitious the system could be. The fortress is inseparable from the network that feeds it. The death trap emerges when the machine is poured like cement over a problem it cannot solve alone. Build the compounding evidence in triads. First triad, mechanical, gearbox, track pins, engine cooling. Keep them balanced and the machine reaches the objective. Allow one to fail and the others follow. Second triad, tactical, route reconnaissance, field gun suppression, infantry liaison. Hit all three and guns die in their pits. Miss one and guns scythe tanks and defile. Third triad, human, crew drills, nerve, endurance. Rehearse the bailout, trust the driver, manage the gunner's pace. Miss this, and even a mechanically sound tank becomes a trap under surprise fire. Climax. Take Flesquières again, but split it in 2 frames. Frame 1. A field gun crew, set forward by a German officer who refuses to withdraw, catches tanks in the open and stops them with direct hits. The picture is stark. Steel burning, infantry stalled, a morning's promise halted. Frame 2. Hours earlier along another sector, tanks cross 3 belts, silence strongpoints, and lead infantry into deep positions with negligible losses compared to attacks under shellfire. The contradiction resolves when you admit the thesis. The Mark IV was both fortress and death trap, its nature flipped by context, doctrine, and the presence of the one weapon it could not shrug off at close range. One-line thesis. The Mark IV made men safer by accepting concentrated risk and punished any plan that forgot to share that risk across a system. Resolution unfolds across time. In 1918, improved models and better tactics push forward again on the Amiens front, where tanks, aircraft, and set-piece artillery combined to crack German lines without the endless pre-bombardments of 1916. Broader roads, more recovery assets, and more experience in route selection extend the tank's survival window. Crews still die in burning hulls, but more machines return, and more infantry cross ground that would have been bullet-swept a year earlier. Survivability increases not because the plates are suddenly thick or the engines suddenly fast, but because the plan now expects the enemy to adapt and designs the counter to the counter. Cultural memory simplifies. The film reel loves silhouettes on ridgelines, black smoke, and slow giants lumbering through wire. It misses the habit of hands, checking track tension at 3 by lantern, cutting brush for fascines, chalking arrow marks for following waves. It misses the paperwork, petrol issues, spare pin counts, route sketches. And it misses the quiet. An infantry platoon that crosses behind a tank and lives to count its own number at dusk because a machine carried the first minutes of risk. There are voices, officers who praise the tank as decisive, infantry who bless it for quieting a gun, gunners who claim that proper defense makes them worthless. There are other voices, men who call the interior a hell of fumes and heat, who say the mask chafed and the splash cut through anyway, who swear they would rather crawl than sit under petrol in a steel box again. Both testimonies fit the ledger. Both become true in their place. Compare inputs and outputs one last time. Input: a Mark IV with 2 guns, 4 or more machine guns, hundreds of rounds, 8 crew, fuel, water, tools, fascine. Output: a lane punched through belts of wire and trench that would have cost a brigade an afternoon and hundreds of men. Input: a forward-sighted German 77 with good crew and nerve, a clear range, and the time to aim. Output: a burning steel room and a crew in the open under machine gun fire. The contrast is not contradiction. It is conditional logic. Epilogue reflection. The Mark IV did not end trench warfare in a single gesture. It ended the idea that trench warfare was immune to choreography. It taught planners the price of surprise and the cost of neglect. It taught crews that bravery inside a hull had to be matched by discipline in maintenance and coordination outside it. It taught defenders that guns pushed forward could reclaim a map that surprise had erased. Above all, it taught a hard truth about safety. In industrial war, safety is not a property of things. It is a property of systems. Return to the opening image. Havrincourt Wood, 6:20, a commander shouting over the engine, a wall of wire ahead. He does not know whether his steel box will be fortress or trap in the next hour. He knows the orders, the route, the spares, the infantry behind him. He knows the fog is real, the ground is good, the plan is good enough. He moves, not through invulnerability, but through distribution of risk, not through thickness alone, but through timing, teamwork, and nerve. The machine shudders forward, carrying 8 men, a plan, and a paradox. The button lands quiet. The Mark IV saved lives by inviting danger in, proving that in the arithmetic of 1917, survival belonged not to those who stood still behind walls, but to those who carried their walls into motion.